Nobody likes a long intro, and this video concept is straightforward enough already, so let's get into it. We've got 5 watch brands to hit today, and for each brand, we'll name one discontinued watch that they need to bring back into their current lineup. I'm Thomas Hendricks, and if you like watches, then you're in the right place. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, as we go through this list, you're gonna agree with some stuff and disagree with some others. I encourage you to disagree. In fact, I'd love to hear why. So drop a comment with your thoughts, please and thank you. We're starting today with Patek Philippe. We'll briefly discuss what they released before getting to what could have, perhaps should have been. Much has been said about the Cubitus already, and I'll cover it more in detail when we do our end of year recap video, so stay tuned for that. It's a divisive watch, to put it lightly, and the reaction to the launch wasn't great. Also, Patek's reaction to the reaction wasn't too kind either. Essentially, Patek decided to take the Nautilus design DNA and shake it up a bit. It's their first new collection in 25 years, and ironically, it feels rushed. It feels like an early sketch of the Nautilus instead of a further refinement of the Nautilus. I agree with their desire to reinvent and redefine their most popular sport watch, but the result comes across as raw and unfinished. They started in a good place and took a step back. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, why not revitalize another dormant and critically underrated model? I'm speaking about the Patek Philippe Neptune. If you search for the Neptune on Chrono24, you'll see time and date versions like the 5080 and complication versions like the 5085. The bracelets on these are my favorite feature. They have such a beautiful rhythm to them, and they incorporate texture to make the watch feel more whole and cohesive. To be fair, some of the details on the 5080 could use some massaging. The dial and the hands are the worst part about this watch, but with another 25 years, I'm sure Patek could figure it out. The 5085, on the other hand, is pretty perfect. And if given a choice between this and the complicated Cubitus, I know which one I'd choose. We go from a brand that can't get it right to a brand that can do no wrong. At least Cartier has been on a roll recently. Their vintage models are getting more attention and higher prices than ever before. They've also shown that they have an appetite for adventurous design throughout their history and in their recent releases. I mean, we have a cushion made of diamonds and a watch that runs backwards. No other brand has been able to create so much with so few elements. They've iterated and iterated and iterated in ways that feel fresh while still feeling distinctively Cartier. So why not combine classic Cartier with creative Cartier? One of the hottest models right now is the Cartier Tank Centre. Prices for these start around $50,000 to $20,000 on Chrono24, and one of the quirkier renditions of the Centre is the dual time featuring 2 crowns, 2 movements for tracking 2 time zones. As much as I love the standard Centre, I think this layout is more inventive, more useful, and a better use of that elongated shape. I had the privilege of wearing one of these for a couple hours when visiting our London office, and boy, oh boy, was it a good feeling. I didn't feel rich, I felt wealthy. The brand has a couple different routes they could take this, and I think that's the beautiful thing. Cartier fans would be more than happy with a standard issue Centre dual time featuring 2 styles of Roman numerals stacked on top of one another, but another route would be to do a series of limited editions and mix and match Eastern and Western dial styles. Why not get playful with Breguet numerals, Roman numerals, Japanese characters, or the Arabic alphabet? There are just so many ways to bring this idea to life, and for a brand that seemingly can't lose at the moment, this feels like an easy win. Before we get to Rolex, let's talk about Omega. And this is where I want y'all to come through in the comments, because Omega has made a lot of really great watches over the years, and a lot of them have earned their own cult followings. I'll mention one that I think has potential, but would need some work. The Omega Flightmaster is such a great all-in-one watch. You've got hours and minutes, of course. You've got a chronograph. You have an inner rotating bezel. You have an airplane-shaped GMT hand, I mean, amazing. And you often have a 24-hour indicator as well. This is essentially a smartwatch before there was even an idea of a smartwatch. While I think it would be a great watch to bring back, Omega would need to make some changes. There's a lot that's timeless about the watch and a lot that's dated, so it's ripe for reinvention. First, the case shape is very chunky and very 1970s, and not in a Nautilus or Royal Oak kind of way. That said, it could be easily reframed in one of Omega's existing cases. I think it would also be smart to swap the 24-hour indicator for something more readily useful like a date subdial. Overall, this watch does a lot and does it well. But I'm curious, if you had to pick an Omega from the archives for a reunion tour, what would you choose? Rolex is a tough one because they rarely discontinue models. Sure, they'll get rid of a certain dial or a certain bezel, but the lineup we have now is very similar to the lineup we've had for decades. I'll tell you my real answer first, then I'll say a fun one that could also work. I'm going to cheat a bit and select a watch that I reviewed recently, and that's the Rolex chronograph. The reason why I'm picking it is because after a month of non-stop wear, it just makes so much sense as a watch. It's not perfect, and there are details I would change, watch the video, but if Rolex's mission is to make the perfect companions for everyday life, then the chronograph fits that bill perfectly. The 116-264 would fit beautifully into their contemporary collection, and they could even make it 38 millimeters, so it really is halfway between a Datejust and a Submariner. So that's my real answer, no surprises there. But what could be also fun would be to bring back stone dials. Other brands are getting into it. It's not as costly as you might expect, and there's an appetite for it from consumers. Also, if Rolex continues to move more into luxury watches instead of pure tool watches, then get luxurious with it. I feel like there's a Rolex that I'm missing that I can't think of right now, so drop a comment if you know one that's discontinued that deserves another look. I mean, I would mention the Stellene or the 9083 as a contender, but those feel too unrealistic for the Rolex of today. Oh well. Let's touch on AP and what's known as the paradox of choice. The paradox of choice states that having more options makes it harder for us to choose and to be happy with our choice. In the case of AP, they can and should make watches, any watches, outside of the Royal Oak. Now, I'm not arguing that the Royal Oak goes away. It's a great watch, and AP does make some non-Royal Oak models. But if there's one takeaway from our deep dive on non-Royal Oak APs, it's that they have so many great designs in their archives to pull from. We highlighted 20 that currently sell for less than $10K on the secondary market, and that's the short list. Now, to be fair, we are starting to see them explore this with their remaster collection. If you can't tell already, I think any heritage watch brand should have a remaster collection of their own, and I'm glad AP is experimenting with it. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work to take a vintage design, blow it up to a, quote, modern size, and hope for the best. So what would I recommend? Take a page out of Cartier's book and ride the dress watch wave, but in more classical and, dare I say, unisex sizes. If they want to keep the remaster collection edgy and sculptural, they have options. If they want to stick with Genta designs, they can revisit the 5369. Or they can do what they've done so well in the past and reissue or reimagine a thin, complicated watch. I actually met a gentleman in Miami who purchased a reference 25685 after watching our deep dive video. Shout out to you if you're watching. All I'm saying is the brand has a lot of options to work with. Keep going with the remaster collection, just remember that the watches have to be wearable in the end. And if they're really feeling lazy, they can always bring back the square Royal Oak. That was fun. And we didn't even talk about Tudor or Vacheron, or I don't know, we might have to do a part 2. Until then, ciao.